Hey guys, welcome back. So this is James again, and in this video we're going to be talking about how to draw water droplets. For this case, the water droplets are going to be seated on a flat surface. So this technique is going to be for when the water droplets are seated on a flat surface, and probably in future videos I'll also discuss one in which water droplets are seated through, they're floating in the air, so maybe if there is motion, like it's dropping down. But now when you're working with drops seated on a surface, things you want to keep in mind are that you want to keep in the color palette of the, like, you want to keep in the color palette of the background which you're working with. So because water is kind of transparent, whatever, it's colorless, so it's going to take up the light of the medium that it is seated on. So that means when you're drawing light, you're going to keep in the color palette of what you're working with. So here we're going to keep in this color palette here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create, and also when you're drawing water droplets, try to make them a little bit small, because the thing is, when you're working, you don't want to draw something big because water droplets are actually very small. So that's another thing you can keep in mind. So here we begin with sketching out something like what you want. So I don't know if you can see it, but I'll anyway be outlining it so you'll be able to see it. So I'm going to sketch out some little bit of I'm sketching out a shape here. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my pen tool and then just create an outline with it. So again, when you're working with digital art, you have a lot of resources, a lot of tools that you can use to kind of make your work much better. So you can as well use all of them. So I'm going to turn off this layer here that I just created. And what I'm going to do, create a new layer and select this shape. So this is the shape we just created. Right now, the first thing I'm going to do is to define my light source. So in defining my light source, my light is going to be coming from this side, right? So my lightest highlight is going to be around here. So that means that there is going to be light down here, and then there's going to be a shadow up here, and then a cast shadow and and light that has passed through. So to do that, I'm going to begin with the light areas. So I'm going to get my brush tool. Again, I'm using a soft brush, and using this color palette, I'm just going to push it up a little bit, and I'm then going to kind of paint over like that. So I'm painting in a shape that is going to make it a little bit hollow. So maybe I can increase the size of this here. So I'm going to paint so that I add form to it. So I'm going to paint in about 3 layers. So the higher I go, the lower I paint. So for example, the areas closer to the shadows are going to be, closer to the boundaries are going to be lighter than the areas further away from the boundaries. Even for the dark areas, the areas that are close to the boundaries are going to be darker in a sense. Okay, so maybe one more. So at the moment it's very small, so you probably may not be able to see it, but you get the idea. So here now have that. the next thing we want to do is we're going to add the shadows. Again, moving back to our base palette, I'm going to just drop it just a little, and I'm going to add again 3 layers. So you want to make them blend uniformly so that it doesn't look weird. So the darker you go, the closer it gets to the boundaries. So the boundaries are going to be really dark or light as well. So when you're working with light, the light so these areas here, they're going to have, so when you get, regardless of whichever background you're working with, you're going to have the lightest areas so to be all very white, so to show that. Of course, in real life it's not the case, because in real life you have a higher resolution and you can easily see that it's not pure white, but in images, to really portray that, you have to kind of overdo it. So I'm going to just maybe paint something like that, a light area, a light source, just like that. And what I'm going to do now is, because of this light, so when I deselect here, Ctrl D, because here you now see that it's very, very tiny right there. But what I'm going to do is that I'm now going to go into this, and I'm going to now put the shadows, because the shadows, probably I should even put them on a different layer below. So this is the normal layer and this is the down layer. So the shadows are going to be in such a way that they're going to be very dark here. They're going to be very dark along the edges here, and there will be light as they move out. Okay. But again, there is another kind of light that passes through here, so it will be probably reflected down there. So I'm going to get this area here, and I also paint something like this, so it will signify light that is kind of there, right? So this is going to be our first drop. So at the moment it may not even look like a droplet because it's standing alone, but once I finish, we'll be able to see the overall result. So Ctrl G, I'm going to group that, and then I'm going to create another group here. I'm going to create another area here. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to now trace out. So what I'm doing here is I'm create about 3 to 4 different shapes. So I'm calling them assets. Okay, so create 3 to 4 different assets, and then we're going to move them around in a way so that it represents what we are trying to do. Okay, so another shape is going to be probably dripping down effect. Okay, so again, you can use references. In this image, I'm not using a reference, but if you're starting, you can use a reference. It will probably help you to actually know and find out other means. So I'm now going to add, again, I'm going to keep this in the same, so I'm going to assume that light is coming from these ends for all of them. So again, this plus is going to be the dark area and this is going to be the light area. So getting my brushes, I'm going to specify the darks in layers again. For this I'm using the soft brushes, and I'm just painting to create some sort of form for this Okay, again, when you go darker, you decrease the area in which the light is traveling, so it gets closer to the boundaries the darker you get. Okay, so there will be really dark over there, and probably that's where also the light will be the lightest highlight. And on this side we're going to have again these color palettes here. Okay, so like kind of that, and we're going to move into the lightest regions, just make it a little bit lighter and get closer to the boundary as well. So this kind of creates that kind of gradient. Of course you can, probably there are some people who can do it with the gradient slider, but the problem with that, it limits you in creativity in how you want to control the light on your own. So I feel there are limitations, but you can also totally do that, it's fine. Okay, so when you're done with that, you can now, if you're happy with that, you can now add the lightest point, which is again this area here, probably around there. So around there. Okay, and with that I'm now going to specify the shadows, the cast shadows, and the so when you're doing that, I prefer to paint it on different layers. Of course, that's an advantage you have when you're painting digitally. You can go over here and paint on different layers. So the thing with that is, again, you're considering these areas here to be the shadows. So okay, let's first paint the darker areas. So the way it's going to move is going to be casting a shadow like that. Okay, and it's going to come like this. That. Alright. So as it moves out, it will be more subtle. But then here, when the light comes again, it's diagonal. So around this place, we're going to have highlights. So just make this area, give it a highlight of its own. Alright. Maybe you can push these shadows out a bit. Right. So again, at lower resolutions, you will see that it looks kind of realistic. So for this eye droplet here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge these layers, because now there is no need for me to redo it again. So I'm going to probably merge those layers, and I'm going to add a mask to it, because what I want to do is I want to kind of fade out this area here a little bit. I don't want it to have that sharp lining there. I don't know, I just you can do whatever you want, but I just feel like I need to fade it out a bit. So on my mask, I'm going to just do something like that, and maybe I can also paint out those areas there. Okay, so that would be the second droplet. So you're going to just, the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to group them. So this is group 3 again. So then I'm going to create maybe 1 or 2 more for the sake of understanding. if you see that these edges are fuzzy, probably let me explain that in the next video, in the next illustration. So here I'm going to get again this color, decrease it a little bit, and now I'm going to draw another one. Let this be kind of circular. I need it to be circular, not oval. I already have an oval one. Actually, for the oval, we can just make a we can just do that instead of like wasting too much time. So what we're going to do now, we're going to get this shape here, and we are going to paint again. We're beginning with lights coming from this, remember, so this is going to be in shadow. So I'm going to get decreased a little bit, and then in paint form we just add form to this. So I'm painting it here like this, while I'm doing, when I get closer to the boundaries, it gets darker, right? While it's getting lighter towards this ends here. Then the next thing is moving over to this side and painting over like that, so there is some sort of form to it. And again, as I get away from, as I get closer to the boundaries, it gets lighter and lighter. So this way you're creating this kind of interesting thing here. Okay, so in some cases, in some backgrounds, you can actually get a very more realistic feeling by just using different blending modes, maybe like overlay, but for this case we don't need it that much because it's kind of a dark tone. So yeah, so here I'm going to give it the lightest highlight. It's probably something like that. So again, the light is going to come like this and it will form a shadow over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my color picker and create a new layer and just paint below this area here. Sorry, Ctrl D, and paint over. So paint them very, very little, paint them very at a very small scale. It's a good thing is that when you're working with when you're working with digitally, that's why I like it. It kind of, you can explore various methods without going very, very far. So again, like this, so the shadows, the highlights that are passing through are going to be reflected around this area here. So I'm just going to do that, and then I'm just going to enclose that whole section with a shadow. There. Okay, so at very, very small scale you will see that it looks like a water droplet. We can paint one larger image of this, okay, so that I can demonstrate something very important. this is going to be really big. So I'm having something like this, and I'm going to paint it like that. So again, if you're using curves, make sure they are flowing. Make sure they don't have huge line curves or very sharp line curves. But if they do, this method that I'm showing now is going to help. Alright, so that's why I've deliberately done that. Let me turn off that layer now, I don't need it. So I'm going to paint. Again, light is coming like this. So the light, the darker areas are going to be, let me get this, and then paint. So when you're painting, you're just creating some sort of form to this, just like that. So here in the navigation window, you can be able to see what you're doing, and you can be able to tell whether your work is realistic enough or whether it's terrible. Right, so that's of course something you want to keep in mind. That's why when I'm sketching, I have this navigation panel open. You can always find it. If you don't see it, just go to window and navigate to there. So the darker areas, again, they are very close to the boundaries. Okay, so, and don't fear going very dark, because again, you're working with paint, and since these are digital images, there is going to be a lot of overexposure and underexposure, so don't fear going too much with it. Alright, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go here, add some little bit of highlights again. Once it's moving out, it's going to get lighter as it tends towards the boundaries. It's going to get light as it tends towards the boundaries. So considering light coming from here, I'm going to paint the lightest points. So you may take off that, and here I'm only using one brush, by the way. Alright, so I'm going to maybe work with that. So considering that it's coming like this, there is going to be some sort of shadows here. Okay, switch that back on and then get this. Let's create a new layer, put it below, and we shall now just paint under it like this. Okay, one moment. So I'm painting using now you can see why I made this. You see, when you make it very big, it kind of has those very strong edges that you can easily see, even if you have to put it very low for it to look very realistic. But that's something you want to keep in mind, or is that you have to kind of keep whether you're painting it traditionally or digitally, just try to keep them. If you're painting digitally, for example, it's a good idea that you zoom in into your canvas to maybe 400%, and then paint small, so that you know that when you're painting that it's going to, you're not going to overshoot. That's just a pro tip. Just something if you struggle with painting like very small, just zoom in and then it'll be alright. Okay, so here I'm going to get a lighter highlight and then just paint over it like this. Okay. So that reflected light will be there. We now have this. Okay. So now you can see that this image is not really good. So what's going to happen is I'm going to go and reselect this shape here, and I'm going to select this area that I want, and I create a mask. So we select it and then mask it, so it's going to mask this shape. And what we're going to do, we're going to soften those edges. So with the mask selected, you go to select, refine mask, so it's going to isolate the whole thing, and then you can feather it a little bit and then make it smooth edges, so that if you have very sharp points, they're going to appear small. And then click OK. So it's going to kind of smoothen out those edges now, as you can see. And the rest is we can now probably, again, we're not going to scale this, we're going to just merge it, for example, and we're going to do the same thing we did. We're going to mask it, and we just hide some of these areas here because I don't need them. Okay. Yeah, so something like that. Alright, so when we're done now, we have our assets. I'm going to also group this, Ctrl G. So we now have assets. Now the thing is to set up our composition. So the thing, what I want you to do is to, of course, get your selection tool. When you click Alt, you can get those double arrows, which can help you to duplicate very quickly. So when you're duplicating, so for example this one, I'm going to duplicate and Ctrl T and scale it down. Don't scale up particles because it may appear terrible or blurry. So if you plan on scaling up any of these assets, make sure that you're painting them big enough so that you only scale them down so that you don't lose too much quality. Okay, so the other thing is, let me scale this one down a bit. So I'm going to just create various variations of these particles. All you're doing here is nothing but balancing out the composition. So when you feel like it's fine, then you can say that you've done it. Now those are your droplets. Okay, so this is how you can make water droplets. So feel free to explore various techniques, and let me know if you found value in this, or there is any other style that you want. Try out various colors, and I'll be glad to hear from you. So this is all I had for you today. Go create, store some, be amazing. Till next time, peace.